Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Out and About with our PD. PD stands for Program Director, and that's me, Erica Narducci. I'm the Program Director for Cancer Support Community Delaware. COVID is still keeping us from being back in person, and because of that, I started doing this video podcast actually 1 year ago. This is our 12th episode. To bring kind of relevant topics and interesting things to you through these interviews. So today on episode 12, called What's Pleasure Got to Do with It? It's my pleasure to interview Penelope Neckowitz. So welcome, Penelope, and thanks for joining me.
Oh, it's so nice to be here. And I love that I'm your 12th person to be interviewed to celebrate your 1 year anniversary with pleasure.
Well, thank you. So just a little background and bio on Penelope. Dr. Penelope Neckowitz is a PhD. She's a clinical psychologist with private practice in Chadsford, PA, with over 40 years of experience working with individuals and couples to address physical and mental health issues, sexual and relationship concerns, professional challenges, and life transitions. She received a PhD in clinical psychology from the University of California, Davis, and did doctoral training at Yale University School of Medicine. Most recently, she has facilitated programs at Cancer Support Community Delaware for women with cancer to address the way cancer affects body image, sexuality, sensuality, intimacy, and desire. And that's why I have asked her, as you can hear, she's very overqualified, but I've asked her to join me here today to talk about the passion that she has as a facilitator with us and more about the group she's done with women. So Penelope, anything else you want to add kind of about yourself and your background, your work as a therapist?
Well, thank you, Erica. You're very kind. Perhaps, do you want me to, I can talk a little bit about my own personal journey. Would that be helpful in terms
Sure.
of, well, I've been working as a psychologist for, as Erica said, over 40 years. And as I've gotten older, I've really moved into working more with women around life changes, life transitions, and became really interested in the area of sexuality. But I came to this really through my own personal experience. So 15 years ago, I had the fortune, I would say it ended up being good fortune, but I got those 3 words, "you have cancer," said to me, and I was diagnosed with and treated for breast cancer. And at the time, in reflecting about it, I realized that I just did what I had to do. I put one foot in front of the other. I did, my treatment. I became a bit of a warrior in dealing with it. And I didn't really think about how it was affecting my body image until I remember I had to go to a wedding, and I had just been through 7 weeks of radiation, and I was wearing a strapless gown, and my skin was all burnt. And I realized that I think this is affecting me more than perhaps I'm allowing myself to know. And then that coupled with, I've had some other health challenges. I had back surgery several years ago, made me really begin to think about the whole issue of sexuality and pleasure and how that changes as women, as people, but I'm really interested in women, as women go through these kinds of life, really significant life, medical, body challenges in their life. And one of the things that struck me was, I remember when I was going through my own cancer treatment, no one talked to me about sexuality, no one. And I found that really interesting. And if a doctor talked to me about it, they would talk about lubrication or creams that I could use, but nobody talked about the trauma that's associated with cancer and the body image changes that go on and how it affects your relationship to yourself and to other people. And so I realized that this was an area where we greatly needed to rethink how women relate to themselves and to their bodies and to their sexuality during this very challenging and traumatic time. And that's how I got here.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I know that's a personal story, but I love how it connects into your professional story too. So I met you back in the fall of 2019. I had first started at Cancer Support Community, and we started this dialogue about bringing this important topic to the women going through a cancer journey, because like you said, it just wasn't being talked about. And it was being talked about in maybe you need this cream, you need this thing, but not about how we really are readdressing our body image and the trauma. So we decided we would start with a 4-part series called Let's Talk About Sex. So tell us about that and how it went.
So this actually, this is a great story. So I met Nikki, and your executive director, who said, "Oh, please, would you come in and do something for, because we have been talking a lot." And so we started talking about what would be of most value. And I said, I really think that women need to find a way to address these really intimate kinds of concerns and deal with the trauma and grieve some of the losses that they had experienced, and then begin to develop new narratives, new strategies for pleasure. So we said, great, we'll do a 4-session. I actually conceived of it as 2 rounds of 4 sessions each. Well, can I just say that we're going 2 years on with the group, and it has been one of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever had in my professional career. The women are pretty amazing. And one of the things that I want to stress is the role of sisterhood. We created a sisterhood with the group, which I think, you do this anyway in your support groups. And I think that's one of the things that Cancer Support Community does so well. But when you're dealing with something as really tender and vulnerable as women talking about, losing breasts or scars or changes in libido, or, I really don't want to have sex, or is it okay for me to just learn about my body in a different way and not be, and do this just for me. Having a small group of women who have been so connected has been so important. And this group, they celebrate each other. They celebrate really, and I think that the value of being able to publicly in the group acknowledge successes is so important. They share gratitudes and they share their desires with each other. And they help each other with resources. It's been amazing.
So I heard you use the word sisterhood. What do you mean by that?
So I think that if we go back in biblical times, women used to come together, especially around menstruation, around childbirth, and they shared, they supported each other. They shared resources. That's sort of what we do in our group. We make it really safe for women to talk about their sadness. And the reason the group ended up has gone as long as we spent a really long time talking about their precancerous bodies, what sex was like before they got cancer. They wrote letters to the parts of their bodies and their sexuality that had changed. They came to terms with incredible gratitude for who they had been, and began to really write new narratives for themselves. And that led to a whole new exploration of what is pleasure, which is really where we are now.
And speaking of moving, we are moving to kind of the next phase, and having kind of these open conversations with women and bringing more in to have a discussion like this. So once a month, you're going to host a group for women called Conversation Cafe, connecting to your life force energy. What's pleasure got to do with it? So tell us a little more about that group, what it'll look like, what they'll be talking about in the group.
Okay, so one of the things that, first off, I think that in our culture, I would say, and this is one of the things that the women in the group have talked about, women don't talk about sex a whole lot. We don't live in a culture where women can talk easily about accessing pleasure and what's the best way to do that. And so we try and normalize it. We talk about, I mean, I think that part of the very first thing that we're going to be doing in this, in the first thing that we're going to be doing in the Conversation Cafe is just helping people to feel safe. Because what happens is that you cannot access pleasure unless you find safety in your own body. So it's really dealing with the trauma of cancer, obviously not to the same extent that you do in your support groups, but acknowledging that there's a change for women and giving them tools to begin to discover what arousal is in a much different way. We often think about arousal as being genital based. There is so much more than just our genitals. I mean, yes, genitals are important, but we have our skin, we have our energy, we have parts of our body that are sources of pleasure and have nerve endings that are amazing avenues for turn on. And so we're going to be helping the women to discover all of that and to also learn about giving themselves permission to not have to force anything, to honor what their yeses and their nos are, to communicate with their partners about that so that they can share some of the grief with their partners, but also some of what they're learning about their arousal and turn on also, but all in a safe environment.
Good. So talk a little bit about how do you create that safe environment, and maybe how do you start your meetings? And I know you do something where you make people feel their skin and see how that feels. Talk about that.
Well, I do what I would call, for want of a better term, we can call it self-pleasure, but it's not self-pleasure like everyone thinks about self-pleasure. It's more a way of grounding yourself through breathing, through a bit of a journey through your body, through learning about how your energy flows and how it may change from moment to moment, or from week to week, or month to month, and learning about whether certain kinds of touch feel better. And that can change, by the way. It can be what I feel tonight may be different. Like some nights I need something that's, like I need to really ground my body. I feel my muscles, my bones. Sometimes I just want a very light touch on my arms or my hands or my body. Sometimes I don't even have to touch in order to feel a sense of pleasure. And so we always start the group with that. And then we begin to talk about, we're going to hopefully, what my hope is that we will have a core group of women who will feel invested enough to come each time, because I think that it's much easier to form a sisterhood if people come consistently.
Good. And I heard you use, and it's kind of part of the title, life force energy. So talk a little bit about what is this life force energy?
The more that we tap into ourselves, into our body, into our desires, into our feelings, all of them, both the physical and the emotional, the more alive we are. And that's where our life force energy is. What happens when people are diagnosed with cancer is sometimes they get constricted and they force the life force out of themselves. All they can do, if they either have fear or they feel trauma, it is so important to connect to life force, to create an expansiveness of our boundaries, to feel like we are more than just this illness that's in our body. So That's some of what I mean by life force. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I love that we're more than just this diagnosis that we've had. So another quote from, I'm going to quote Penelope here. She says, "Cancer and pleasure seem incredibly divergent from each other, and yet connecting to pleasure is both healing and life affirming. And yes, possible during and after cancer treatment." So what would you say to the woman who's listening right now and is thinking, sex is the last thing I am thinking about on my cancer journey?
So I would say this is not really, I mean, ultimately, this can be about sex, but this is about pleasure. This is about, you can have an orgasm whether you have sex, whether you have intercourse, whether you don't have to have any genital contact. This is about connecting to your body with pleasure, because when you do that, it releases oxytocin, which is the feel-good hormone, but is also what enhances your immune system, enables you to sleep better, helps your cognition, helps your cardiovascular system, and will help your healing. So I don't want to be more blunt than that, but the truth is that is the truth.
Right. I think we could use a little bit of that as we're going through our cancer journeys.
And as we're
Right.
going through COVID right now too.
That's right. That's right. Any kind of life struggle, it's very important. Right.
Yeah.
I have to confess, in my early conversations with Penelope as we developed this, I did a lot of flushing. And she mentioned earlier, it isn't really something that we talk about in culture. I'm so thankful we're able to have these conversations and to make it more normal to talk about it, and bring this program for our women. So I want to thank you for sharing such a sensitive subject and talking so openly about it over the last 2 years, but also tonight with us, and helping me get more comfortable with it too. So as we get ready to close, two things I want to first ask: if there's anything you want to mention about the group or about your exploration that we didn't have a chance to talk about.
No, but I just want to say, first off, if you're on like one of the women in our group sort of had to be cajoled into coming, and she's now one of the ardent, supporters of the group. I think that, and what all the women say is that this has actually been pretty normative for them, that had they not had cancer and gone through this journey, they might not have learned how to expand their connection to pleasure and to their bodies. And so I would just say, yeah, if you're in the middle of treatment, probably sex is not what you want to think about, but connection to pleasure is absolutely, I would say, one of the more important things that you can do for yourself. And I'd love you to come and try the group. And if you have any questions, I have a website, which is penelopeneckowitz.com. You're welcome to contact me if you have any questions about this. Erica would be happy to talk to you. And I'm just so excited to be able to offer this at Cancer Support Community.
Good. So I will mention we are going to put in I will put in the information on Facebook, the link to sign up for the group, also Penelope's website that she mentioned. The Conversation Cafe will meet the fourth Wednesday of every month at 6:30. So it's starting next week on Wednesday, the 26th. And you can always reach out to me if you want to sign up, and we have multiple places where the registration will be. But as we bring it to just a final close, what's the most important thing you've talked about that you want women to remember as they leave today?
I want everyone to know that it's really important to honor your bodies and to honor what you're going through, and to not force yourself into something that doesn't feel right for you. Dealing with cancer is quite a journey, and it does create trauma in the body. And so the very first thing that you will learn in my group is how to create safety, how to ground yourself. And from that place, you can then connect to pleasure. And this is a much larger and much more enhanced notion than just having great sex. I mean, ultimately, that would be wonderful. And I hope that that happens, because the more you learn about your own access to pleasure, the more you'll be able to take that into your relationships. But it really is about your healing and about your relationship with your own body and self.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for telling us what pleasure has to do with it.
Thanks, Erica. It's really nice to talk with you. And I'm looking forward to doing the Conversation Cafe.
Great. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks for having me.